there are a lot of people that were not surprised, except by the, the level of dissatisfaction and rejection that was shown by the voters in Scotland, many of whom just didn't turn up. I think that was the lowest turnout since World War II. Labour got a whopping kind of landslide on the lowest vote they've ever had.
Aye.
And the SNP have been left with 9 Westminster MPs. We did not see Alba register. We didn't see ISP pick up seats, which, I feel particularly sad about personally. That's just, because I'm very, very attached to direct democracy and the people's sovereignty. So that was, and we didn't see any of the Indie for Indies making any headway, but it didn't, it didn't just depress or upset me. It was kind of as expected. What happens in a protest vote. Scottish voters are not as stupid as our politicians seem to think that we are.
Indeed.
We don't. People know. That's tactical voting, and it sent a message. So for us, and Colette as well, I know it's always been heading for 2026 and not this nonsense of an English election.
Well, Colette, you were mentioned in dispatches there. How are you feeling after taking part in this contest? Where are your feelings lying? How's your emotions?
Contest, I wouldn't actually really call it a contest, to be fair. It wasn't an election that we were particularly interested in. Obviously, we were standing on abstention anyway. It's never been our main focus. We were just really using it as a way to promote the party outside the social media bubble that we have, and actually help some of the members actually see what it is to stand in an election from the minute and an election's called, to getting your nominating papers right through to the night of the count, and being at the count and seeing how that all works. So it was really quite a valuable thing for us to stand, just to go through that whole process and actually to try and promote the party as much as we possibly could with the resources that we have. And as you always talk about, Norrie, with the lack of regional and national broadcasting in Scotland, we really don't get that the same type of broadcasting media attention than all the main parties get. So, you just do what you can when you can. As Sara said, I think it was a foregone conclusion Labour were going to get a landslide anyway. So we knew that. It was really looking to see exactly what was going to happen with the SNP, where they were going to be going between them and the Lib Dems. And I think I said to you a few times that it looked like definitely they were not going to be the third biggest party down there, so they were not going to be getting their 2 questions, so they were going to be even more silenced than what they've been before. So I think it was really just a reflection on how much Lib Dems were going to take over the SNP. That was the biggest thing, and they done actually really well. But for myself, it was all the different type of emotions. I was exhausted, exhilarated. You just go through the process, and I think now it's just a wee bit of reflection on what's happened. Got some sleep, and now again it's about obviously 2026, because that's always been ISP's main focus since we started in 2020.
Well, lot in there. Sara, we saw Nicola Sturgeon on television. Absolutely flabbergasted. I'll tell you what, we're talking about, we expected it. It looked from her face and her language, she wasn't expecting that. John Swinney he's come out and says, we must talk and we must have a discussion and we must look at ourselves. We've been saying this for the last 2 years. And then Alex Salmond's in the back there biting away. These people cannot be a part of the way we're looking forward. We need new faces. We need a new agenda. What's your thoughts?
Well, there's a saying that people ascribe to Einstein. It's not exactly what he said. He was talking about the mathematical solutions, but what what people quote is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expect result. And, so we've got people now going, okay, what do we do? Now, that is great that so many people are going, okay, what do we do? And hang on a minute here. This is not the response you expect. Those are not the comments. I did not watch the thing live, and I will tell you now that's because I refused to pay the license fee, and I do not cheat. And I wasn't going to watch it online because I knew I would end up, throwing my computer out the window. So, and with really important elections going right, I can't afford to do that. But so, I watched the bits afterwards and sat there with with my jaw on the floor.
Yeah.
The great architect of an SNP that was, and this is a thing people really need to repeat to themselves if they're not clear about our situation. Nicola Sturgeon instructed SNP MPs and MSPs not to mention independence.
Yeah.
And she did so at a time when we had 56 out of 59 MPs return to Westminster. And specifically, this isn't about independence. Well, what do you think it was about then, guys? So that person who did that sat on national TV and talked about the SNP she's a backbench MSP.
Yes, now.
The prominent, officer in the party, and talked about they and them, what they had done, and grinned like a Cheshire cat and cozied up to people that we know are enablers of the corporate kind of takeover of the whole of what they call Britain. And there she is talking about her role from the back benches. Now, that, if you have a party formed entirely to take forward the will of people for self-determination, and you have someone with that influence and who has had that position of power speaking in that way, if I were still a member, it would be right. You need to resign. I was horrified.
Yeah. But I was looking at my notes, Colette, from February, March, and going back, and I was saying, look, the mood in the streets is really bad, and I'm looking at this is from SNP people, by the way, telling me this. Westminster doesn't work for Scotland. The ceasefire motion that we're going to put through was curtailed. It was blocked by the speaker. And at that point, we thought, nobody's for Scotland in this Westminster Parliament. Nobody's going to be supporting the SNP. It's time to get out. And then 2 weeks ago, I get this thing through my door. And can I just read it? Because it really baffles me why they would go down this line. Your SNP government is working hard to deliver you, blah, blah, blah. We all know that Westminster doesn't work for Scotland. Well, tell me something I effing don't know, right? Just for goodness sake, disastrous decisions from austerity to Brexit, all this stuff, I know. It's the blame game, and it goes all the way through, and I won't bore you with what else is in here. And it comes to the bottom, and it says, the one word, independence is normal, and other countries of a similar size to Scotland are both wealthier and fairer. You don't say! Telling me things I know. Where has the SNP, Colette, lost its identity? And how do we get it back to being a people's party again?
Oh, that's a big question. Right. Okay. So the situation with the messaging, I think everybody noticed that during the election, their messaging changed on a very regular basis. Which then it really does confuse the electorate quite a lot, especially those that are not very engaged in politics. And we have to remember that there is an overwhelming amount of people out there that really don't bother with watching politics shows or listening to radio and all the rest of it. And when it comes to an election once every 5 years or whatever, they might then listen a wee bit more or they might speak to their family and friends, or who am I going to vote for? But they're not really very engaged. So when a message is changed throughout a campaign, it, people, we always say people like continuity, as in they like that structure, that routine. They like something that is going to be solid in their lives. They like it to know that there's going to be a start, a middle, and end. They like that format. So when things keep getting changed, it confuses them. So I wasn't too sure why their messaging kept getting changed. And also, they were also saying things like the SNP are the only ones to get the Tories out. But the Tories, we already knew that the Tories were already out. Anyway,
I know.
Their biggest competition was obviously Labour. So, and they knew fine well that for whatever reason, it's up to the electorate. It's supposed to be a democracy after all, but there was there was a lot of tactical voting going on. That some SNP voters who were maybe non-members but usually vote for them, instead of voting SNP for whatever reason it might well be, they were actually then going to lend their vote, because we do lend our vote to Labour. I don't understand the logic to that, because Labour were all going to already win anyway. So I don't understand why they were saying getting the Tories out, because the Tories were already out. Even at this, from the minute Rishi Sunak stood at 10 Downing Street in the pouring rain to announce the election, we already knew it was almost a done deal that Labour were going to get in anyway. So the messaging really wasn't clear. It wasn't consistent. It wasn't structured. I think it was almost, I dare to say, slightly as unprofessional as I said. The announcement, the way he done the announcement of the election, it was so unprofessional. The way he actually done it in the rain and didn't use the the £1 million conference room that never gets used. So I think, I don't know whether the SNP, they just didn't have the finances. I don't really know, but I think they're really going to have a huge, big time now to reflect and dissect everything that has happened, and where and how they went from 47 seats down to 9. And a lot of people, we've got to remember this, Norrie, we keep talking about the MPs that have lost their seats, but you've got lots of people there that have now lost their jobs that work for those MPs, and it's them that I feel a wee bit more for them and their families. They've lost their jobs, but they're never really mentioned an awful lot. It's more about the MPs that have lost their seats.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I was hoping in all that, Colette, would come to the conclusion that a Scottish convention has to be orchestrated and set up immediately to get more different voices. Because I'll come back to you, Sarah. One of the things that I found really dispiriting from the SNP was their lack of engagement with others. And I'm not talking about Alba. I'm talking about Salvo. I'm talking about Still in Directive. I'm talking about Commonweal. I'm talking about Caledon Media, for heaven's sake. They wouldn't come near us with a barge pole. Now, that snobbery, I don't know what it is, if it's snobbery or if it's fear or whatever it is, that has got to stop. And we've got to use every advantage we have going up to 2026.
Where to start here?
I know,
So
I know.
It's not just Salvo, Stirling Directive, Commonweal, Caledon Radio, Dr. Lynn Tammy Connolly. Remember that amazing long one?
Yes, I do.
And Emma Roddick wouldn't even turn up to meet her. The message that has been going out, it's also put that alongside the legal profession. The vast majority of lawyers in Scotland, the Law Society in there, in the faculty of College of Faculty of Advocates, the judges, I forget what they're called. They've all come out really strongly against the proposals of the Scottish government to change law in ways that remove things that are distinctively Scottish, and in ways that are dangerous to judicial impartiality, and in ways that are the claim of right. They're not listening to the lawyers. They're not listening to to the Scottish police. They're not listening to doctors. They're not listening to the Freeports campaign. They're not listening to the people. They're not answering people's questions when you talk to them about, well, hang on a minute, where's the legislation that ensures that these Freeports will not have tax dodging corruption, that ensures that workers' rights will be upheld? Where's the mechanism to do it? No answer. We get Stephen Flynn telling one of our members, well, you know, we have to be in on it because we need a piece of the pie. And so, this is Scotland's pie.
Yeah.
This is Scotland's pie. What the hell are you talking about? No response. None attending any meetings. You've got, you know, Tricia Marek telling Robin McAlpin off today, media, for daring to say the SNP needs to do this now. Now, here's this. This absolutely comes down to, we're going to ask you for your vote, whether you're a party member or not. But if you don't like, if you're voting against us because of the way that we are constructed, the way that we're behaving, you don't get a say unless you're a member. I mean, it doesn't work. If you're asking people to vote for you, you're listening to them as well as your own members. But there is the mentality. And take a step back from that, and it's the Westminster mentality. It's privileged. It's privileged, unaccountable, and I'm sorry, but this is English socio-political philosophy. The masses, the rabble who are useful when it comes to a vote, but we know best, and we'll do what we want, whether the nation, whether the people like it or not, because you elected us. And I'm sorry, I'm going to quote Alex Salmon here, and I was present when he said it. If people want a change, if they don't agree with what a government has done, they get the chance to elect a new one the following 5 years. Aye, right, Alex. This is not working for people. And there's how the SNP is behaving. And it's a kind of an endemic and very non-Scottish attitude throughout our political establishment. Pat you on the head, tell you what's right. We're the experts. You elected us after all. So go away and let us get on with the job. You don't have any say in it beyond putting your mark on a piece of paper. And they're not about to change. So you talk about a convention. Liberation is just finishing up its elections, and that committee will be working to coordinate what we're doing with what, and with others who are coordinating a potential convention. The Scottish Foundation for Independence is working on that. It's in the manifesto of liberation that putting the Scottish Convention of the Estates back together is a priority.
Indeed.
But we are going to have to show how sovereignty of the people works. We're going to have to show that, not the great and the good, the usual suspects, but how we involve people and how we give them their say and encourage them. Not, what happens if you've been brushed off for years and years and years and told by the great and the good, the political elite, we'll do it, vote for us because we'll do it. And you see them betray that, you see nothing happened. And it's not going to happen, Norrie, because the whole of Scotland's situation in the Union is the equivalent of a lobster in a flipping lobster pot. There was never any way out unless someone and cut the wires, or we did. So what we're doing now is we're seeing that we need a very different shift. We cannot get out of this lobster pot. We cannot change the situation using the same means that have failed for so long. We've now got to start thinking radically and thinking outside the box. And as you know, Salvo and Liberation have been doing that for 2 years.
Indeed. Wow. Colette, there we go. We're going to get something, and something's going to happen. But we have to look back, and people are already commenting today about this ultra-controlling leadership from Nicola Sturgeon. That has got to go, and that has got to go now. This style and presentation, and really not very much hard work being done on things like a land reform and a council tax replacement, etc., that they promised at the very start of their tenure. These things have to be looked at, and we must say, for all your efforts, Nicola Sturgeon, they were wrong. For all your efforts, Alex Salmond, you've exhausted your talent. We need new people with a new vision. We have to move on from this, don't we?
Yeah, we can't stay in the status quo, and if you keep voting the same way, then you get the status quo all the time, and nothing's going to move forward. And I know change is difficult for people, But people have to step up to the mark, and the likes of when I set up ISP, I had to step up to the mark and say, right, what do we need to move this forward? And the way was to set up a regional list party. So I had to start thinking out the box and talking to a lot of people, and it was talked about a regional list party for a very long time, but nothing was getting done about it. So a lot of people will talk about things, but it's actually putting it into practicality terms. So I thought, well, why are we just constantly talking about it? We need to make it happen, and the only way to do that is actually make it into an action point. So I done that, and I set that up. But again, the SNP, as we all know, wanted the SNP 1 and 2. So again, we were swimming against the tide. A smaller party, brand new party with this strategy. But again, the bigger party that's been there for all these years at that point, maybe 14 years at that point. So of course, a lot of independent supporters who've always relied on that one particular party in all those years and relied on them and were members and etc. They would obviously try and listen to them because they would have thought that they knew better, even though we were like putting out videos, etc. So we're always going to be swimming with the tides. But I think now with what's happened, maybe this is what's had to happen now. For people to act, because sometimes, no matter what, if you've got, say for example, any type of addiction, or something's not going right in your life, sometimes you've got to get to the lowest point before that you can actually reflect on moving up. Again, you've got to come right down to the bottom, and then you start moving back up in life. So maybe I always say things happen for a reason. Sadly, we didn't really want to get to this point, but maybe it's came to this point so that people will then reflect, and as I said earlier on, dissect exactly how did we get here, what's actually happened here, and then they might start looking for different ways. Now, I've always said, even though I set up a political party, I've always said that the government are there to govern the country. It's the people that should be there to put the case forward for independence, because people will relate to other people putting that case, not a politician. Because again, not every politician, it might be liked, or independence isn't about one party, and one party is not about independence. So it's about the people making that case. But the government should have been actually, in all these years, especially over the past 5, 6, 7 years, they should have been actually being a government in Parliament. We know that it's not in particular, it's an executive arm, but they call it government. But they should have actually been working as though we are an independent country.
Correct.
They should have been starting to do the groundwork, like, for example, the currency resolution that got passed in the 2019 conference. Nothing's really been done about that. They've not set up anything to do with the central bank, of who's going to be the printers, where's the buildings going to be for the printer, and all these things should have been started to get put in place so people can see a structure being formed. So there isn't this, well, how are you going to do your currency, and how are you going to do it? There's all these questions that are not answered because they haven't started working and putting their ducks in a row so they can say, look, we found a printer. There's a company here that's going to do that. We've got a building here that is perfect for that in this area. That could be used. Central bank, public bank. Talking about things like universal basic income. Talking about, as you said, a land tax instead of council tax. They've not been doing the job, as in showing people what an independent country could look like. And I know they've got limited powers with being a devolved parliament, but they could have used them a lot better. They could have used them a lot better.
Excuses, Sarah, from the SNP. And we've been at Caledon Radio, and I know you have as well, all over the place. We've been putting ideas across on broadcasting. You've been putting things on about constitution, and Alf Baird has put on a model of colonialism. These things could have easily been brought to the people and easily digested, and then people would have understood quite better where we are in this world and what we're doing in this world. When you're rudderless as a party and totally without message, it's always going to be the fact that people will turn away from you. And where does the SNP go from here? Because all I'm getting is a contrite look at themselves without bringing in people from anywhere else. And I just think we're doing the same thing even after this election.
Well, because the way human beings think is very like tram lines. Trams can't turn right and left. When they want to, they've got to follow the tram lines. And it's very easy for your thinking to get human beings to get that thinking absolutely along the tram lines, and there's no other alternative. I think that the big opportunity that the SNP missed was that there is one dividing line, and they could have operated along that dividing line very clearly. They have themselves acknowledged that the people of Scotland are sovereign. It doesn't take a lot of research to find out what that means. In Scotland, the people are sovereign because they're the crown. And therefore, that is, the crown in Parliament is the people in Parliament, with the sovereignty remaining with the people. Now, had they decided to operate as if that were, as it is, the case, with, the people have said this, and we're going to do that to the best of our ability. And when blocked by Westminster, it's another piece of evidence that Westminster is simply a colonizing power. But to show people, they could have responded positively to the Sterling Directive, and that apparently put the fear of God into them.
I know.
They could have shown by the way that they operated what sovereignty could look like, even just some level of that being acknowledged. Well, the people do not like this, or they do not want this, or they do want this. We're going to do our best to operate as a Scottish government, which is answerable to the people and in law can be sacked by the people. So we are going to acknowledge that. We're not going to operate like a mini Westminster, which is what they've done. We're not going to impose policies that people hate over their heads. We're not going to roll over to the sell-off of Scotland's sovereign territorial assets to corporations. No, we're going to say we want a piece of the corporate pie. Scotland owns that pie, guys.
Yeah.
And they're not, and I'm not any happier with the way that, the ALBA membership rejected free ports. And yet, there's Steve Chisholm, Mr. Freeports himself, standing as a candidate and leading their business and team. So, this notion that the people are sovereign, which is a political meme, is actually very, very powerful. You show people that you take that seriously, that that is a part of the conditions of the permanent condition of union, if there were such a thing as a voluntary partnership. You stand on that, you insist on that, you behave that way, and you give people a sense of who they are. You put the backbone back into the independence movement, and you don't need to say then that you're a pro-independence party. All you have to say is that you represent the sovereign people of Scotland, that you stand on Scottish sovereignty. If the people decide and give us 5 mandates for a say in their own future, that is the right of the people to decide. It's a slight difference, right? It's a slight difference between we're for independence and that internationally respected stand. We stand for democracy and the sovereignty of the people of Scotland, and they have this right. And that is such a clear message, and they don't like it. And that is why we're where we are today. And that is why it is going to take a movement that, in spite of the tram lines and the way people have been conditioned to think, and the colonial mindset and the colonial wounds of our national psyche, that we have to get that message out to the people of Scotland. You are sovereign, and you don't elect anybody to represent you who regards themselves as taking your sovereignty and then being sovereign over you.
Got a couple of messages coming in. If we can just read these out. Maureen, thanks a lot. Maureen and Carluke. The failure to engage with Salvo, Caledon media, who have all brilliant ideas, is their downfall. She's agreeing with that one. The other one, who can take the SNP back to the grassroots? Nobody. It's the SNP members, and the members must be heard, says Maureen. Dorothy as well, she's just said. Brian Masson has come in. He says the failure to the SNP state independence from the people. Now's the time to rid the party of those MPs who have done nothing. No way back into Holyrood as a job that he's talking about. They have failed the indie movement. They have had their shot. They should be retired. On that, Colette, we can't see these faces that have done nothing for Scotland and Westminster suddenly appearing on the SNP's candidate list for Holyrood, can we?
I think we probably will. Yes,
but should we?
of course we will. I again, that's a matter for the SNP.
I know,
because obviously when it comes to election, they have to go any member, because they are now just members of the SNP. Unless some of them maybe go somewhere else to another party or whatever. But you've got to remember that a lot of the MPs that have now gone, who were for the GRRB, I'm wondering how that is going to reflect on the actual membership that supported these MPs that were for the GRRB. So I am not too sure then how again the membership will change. I don't know whether some of them will then maybe move to the Greens. I don't know, but
who knows?
when it comes to, because they don't have many MPs now that are actually promoting the cause that they're fighting for. So they don't have that same support anymore. So there's that as well about the actual membership, where they're going to go. But when it comes to leading up to 2026, they are just members now of the SNP, and they will be putting their names forward to be candidates in their own branches. And again, it's up to the branches to nominate and decide on who they want to be their candidate from that area, and then they go through vetting. So there is a process there that they all now have to go by. But I think really it's about what is John Swinney and the NEC actually going to do about the SNP overall. How are they? It's up to them. He's the leader of the party, and okay, he's the first minister, but he is fundamentally the leader of that party. He has then got to sit down and have serious talks with his NEC and really work on where do the SNP go from here, because is there a party that can actually continue for another 2 years? Financially, they're down an awful lot of money financially.
Oh yes, aye.
And if members do start to leave because of the MPs that have now been deselected, they might actually be financially worse off again with memberships and supporters and interest. So they're really going to have to work on where are they, what are they going to do, how are they going to do it, and can they do it? Will they get people that will actually maybe go back to them to maybe try and build up the SNP again? I'm not too sure. But again, that is what happens when you don't listen to the public. You take the people that lent your vote, because again, not all people that voted SNP were members. They were lent the vote, and they didn't listen to those people that lent them the vote, and they became they felt as if they were untouchable. I think they got to that point. They were quite complicit in not really listening to the public. So the responsibility now is on John Swinney and his NEC to really decide if there is going to be an SNP, and how then does it function from here on in leading up to 2026.
Well, my faith, I thought we were going to get some really big, huge suggestions today, but if we have to rest ourselves in the fact that John Swinney, the chief devolutionist, who was attached to Sturgeon all through our campaign, is the guy to lead us out of this, I'm not at all convinced we're on the right road. Sarah. Just on the constitution, the claim of right. Ian Barr suggested that the SNP would be afraid of being laughed out of Westminster with a press mocking them. Do you think there's something in that?
How would that be different?
But the more serious and the more closer we come to things, the more we get vitriol thrown at us. I'm not sure. He just says they'd be afraid of being left out of Westminster.
Well, let's just remember that it was Ian Blackford that put forward the motion that, just word for word, what the Scottish Constitutional Convention, who produced a booklet called Scotland's Claim of Right, which was not plucked out of the air as a nice, rallying call. It was on the basis that the claim of right actually delivers this and is a condition of the Union, that that people of Scotland are sovereign and have the right to determine the form of government best suited to their needs. Now, the form of government is a very carefully worded phrase, and it actually means any form of government that they choose at any time that they choose it. It's going back to the claim of right, which was based on the sacking of a government. It's the right of the people to overturn a government. It's the right of the people to say, we won't have this one, we'll have this one. We'll have proportional representation, or we'll have direct democracy, or we'll have participatory democracy, or we'll stick with, feudal first past the post, whatever the people of Scotland decide. Now that, because it was pinned to the claim of right, which is a condition of union for all time, it was one of only 2 SNP motions that ever made it through Westminster. And how they dealt with it was they made sure nobody turned up. So not enough people turned up to make it go onto as it were, onto the statute books. But they were too afraid. Every other SNP bill or motion, they turn up to catcall and jeer and laugh and carry on with people like Lucy Fraser, her maiden speech, who felt entirely justified and entitled to talk about Oliver Cromwell selling the Scots into slavery, and there's the solution to the Lothian question. So this was already passed. It was already accepted. It's already gone through, even if it didn't make the statute books. So they already had this ground to stand on and say, well, look here, you accepted that. You didn't dare challenge that. And, and it's time that was upheld. So the press will do what they've always done. They'll do, the MPs will do, the English contingent will turn up to catcall and jeer and laugh at the fact that they can sell Scots into slavery or whatever. They've always done that. They'll always do that. But the question is, for the SNP, what ground are you standing on? And I'll tell you this, the ground that says you claim this is a voluntary union. You claim this is a partnership. Well, the partnership agreement says this. So either it is or it isn't. And that's a hell of a lot more powerful than standing there and saying, we're not here to make trouble, Tom Shepherd. We're not here to be good parliamentarians. I feel British. I beg your pardon? That is not a platform you stand on to challenge the unlawful actions of a colonizing state.
But so, Sarah, the thing about all that is, and it makes all sense to me, but if you had 56 MPs in there all singing from that same hymn sheet, it would have had an effect. Now you get 9 in that Westminster Parliament. It's hardly going to make a difference, is it?
They've missed that boat. And so what that means, and it's much harder, that's one of the things I don't believe. I believe history will not forgive them.
I know.
They have now made it imperative that the people themselves, as downtrodden and as desperate and as disenfranchised and as hopeless and betrayed as they feel, have got to find the grit in themselves to get up and say, right, we will do this for ourselves. And the job of Salvo and Liberation is not, this is one of the things that's taken a while to explain to people. It's not to deliver independence. It's to deliver the right to self-determination of the people of Scotland, to deliver their constitutional rights as the sovereign authority in Scotland, and to do with that authority as they choose as they will, and to make sure that there's no block in the international community that says, well, Scotland already used that right to create the union, that right of self-determination, and now they need Westminster permission. That's, that is a big job. It's the reason we have a very expensive KC's opinion on the way. It's the reason that Liberation is there, because you need a platform as an NGO that where you can deliver that message, so we can begin to level the playing field. But it's all about handing that power back to the people of Scotland, not keeping it, not saying we'll deliver this. It's you can deliver this as the people of Scotland if you so choose, but you've got to realise that you have that power, and you've got to be willing to stand up and use it and believe in yourselves.
Yeah, but as that boat passed, Colette, has this set back the independence campaign a good 10 years?
I would definitely would hope not, because I really, as I said earlier on, not one party equals independence and vice versa.
But we need a political party.
We do need political parties, but as Sara said, I think the case has to come from the people, and whether it's the Liberation, a convention or something, people will listen. The electorate will listen to the average person out there. No political party so far has been able to deliver us independence. Let's put it that way. And even in the Indie Ref 2014, it was the people. Yes, we had the SNP obviously was there, but it was the Yes movement, as they called it, the Yes movement, and they were out in the streets, and they were the ones, the activists that put their the feet on the ground, and they pounded the streets. They were the ones that chapping the doors. They were the ones that were doing the marches. They were the ones that were going to all setting up all the Yes groups and all the rest of it. It was the people that were doing that, Norrie. And when it came to voting for it, it wasn't a party you were voting for. So yes, political parties might have their presence here, as in, given maybe a vision, but they can't on their own get us independence. It has to be a people's movement, and that's why we have to galvanise people. We do, yes, obviously we need political parties to be in our parliament, but again, as Sarah's saying, we need to again look at, and ISP are for direct democracy. We think that any elected representative should actually be accountable to the people. That's the way we've always seen things. But I think it's trying to change people's mindsets, because this is the way our seemingly democracy has been for all these years. We've seen this structure. This is the structure, like what they do down in Westminster, the Speaker of the House, and all the palaver and the shenanigans that go on with the ceremonies and all that. And it's very antiquated and a bit of a faff. We don't want all that anymore. That's old. But this is the structure that we've been used to. It's the process that we've been used to, and now we are talking about a slightly different process, a slightly different structure, and people are a wee bit wary of that. But we just have to keep plugging in as many different contexts as we possibly can, how it can change and how it can work, and why it can work, and how you would benefit as the people of Scotland, because you would have accountability. You would be able to say that you're not happy with, like, say, the bottle return scheme. We didn't have a say in that. It wasn't in anybody's manifesto. We didn't vote for it.
Freeport's wasn't in anybody's manifesto. We still got it.
No, and I don't think it was in any manifesto in this general election either.
Nope. This, all I can say is I've got figures in front of me from last Friday. In Scotland, 167,000, nearly 168,000 people voted for the Reform Party. That's the danger we're in, isn't it? Because you've got a populist leader, even attracting Scots. And I don't know who these Scots are. I'd like to know who voted for Reform, knowing what Nigel Farage is about. But you know what? When people see something they like, or it kind of touches something in them. It could be anger, it could be something, resentment, it's they're losing their job, and they go, that guy's waiting for your vote, and he gets in. What I'm saying here is, if Nigel Farage can take that amount of people, and 235,000 people in Scotland still voted Tory, no matter what they've done to this economy, and no matter what they've done in COVID, still these chunks of people still vote the way they do. It's maybe it's just the fact that we have to wake up to. Maybe not everybody in Scotland wants independence, and we've got to start from scratch again.
I don't think that's true, Norrie.
I tell you what, there's so many people flat right now, Sarah. So many people fed up, and they don't know where to go with their vote. They are lost. And the SNP was where they hung their coat on, and they could be satisfied in their own mind that they were doing the right thing. Now you can't have that's gone. That is gone. Mm-hmm. And we're losing people to the political discussion.
Well, what I would say is, look at what proportion of those who voted, and remember that a lot of people count the votes of those who stayed at home, mm-hmm. and remember what that means as a proportion of the population of Scotland.
2.5 million people voted. 2.5 million out of 5.5.
Yeah, so
less than half.
How many people abstained from voting as a protest? How many people spoiled their ballots? Mm-hmm. That's a considerably larger number than the ones that voted Tory or Reform. Mm-hmm. So what you're looking at there is it's likely to be a Tory bloc in Scotland, and we know we have that, but that is not anything close to a significant, to a majority. Mm-hmm. You're looking at a proportion that's always going to be there. Then you look at, if the SNP is done, then is that independence on the back burner for 10 years? No, I'd say this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for Scotland, as painful as the lesson is. This Westminster lobster pot is nothing but that. There's no way for Scotland to free itself through the colonising state. There never has been. The political route has always been a bust. Mm. That's a hard thing for the political establishment to take on, because their entire raison d'etre as pro-independence representatives is that they will somehow find us a way through this tangle of lies and capture that has been put in place by the colonising state. And they, mm-hmm. They cannot admit that they cannot do it. And they will not admit that it's by handing away their power, giving it back to the people, that there begins to be a flicker, a glimmer of that hope, that light at the end of the tunnel. Mm-hmm. So they're left behind. But let's put it in historical context, as Alfbert keeps pointing out. That has been the case in every post-colonial nation, mm-hmm. where the political establishment, look at the IPP and the coming, the rise of Sinn Féin, mm-hmm. every single political party has accommodated itself to the colonizer, and it gets swept away by a liberation movement. Now, that liberation movement doesn't need to be called that. No. It's the movement that says, we've had enough. This is, and wakes up to the fact that, wait a minute, we're a colony. We don't have to live like this. And there's all kinds of strategies that open up then for Scotland, and open up then for the way that people vote. So imagine in 2026 that we ask people not to vote for a party, but to vote for a candidate, two candidates actually, mm-hmm. who have Scottish sovereignty on their ballot strapline, Scottish mm-hmm. sovereignty, because that means the right of Scotland to decide. It means the authority of the Scots over their own territory, their own politics, their own mm-hmm. Constitution. It means all of it, Scottish sovereignty. Mm-hmm. Now, if we can, over the next 18 months, mm-hmm. Get all of our campaign groups, Salvo, mm-hmm. Our liberation members out there, signing people up to and explaining what we need you to do, what we is vote for it doesn't matter what party they are, mm-hmm. but the candidate that will have Scottish sovereignty on the strapline, with all that means. That's a shift. Instead of thinking about the party and how do we find something that's not Tory, Labour, Green, Lib Dem, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. SNP or Alba, well, we'll vote Reform. No, here's something that is also not the same. But it's I will hand the power back to the people of Scotland. This is where self-determination comes from. In international law, the right to self-determination is not the right of a government. It's the right of the people.
Yeah.
Right. So
Mhm.
so we can we can shift things in all kinds of ways once we give up on this hopeless attempt to fight our way out of this lobster pot that we're in as part of Westminster, as a captured minority in Westminster, and we start to think about how we come out of the corner fighting, because we've a lot on our side now.
We have. Sarah, are you implying that anyone in any political party then who puts the sovereignty of the people, you'll back? So anyone that comes forward?
Yeah.
So even if they're a Green or they're a Liberal Democrat and they think, well, sovereignty of the people, that must, how easy or difficult that might become, no party ties. It's going to have a big shift on education. We're going to have leaflets going out, websites are going to have to be developed. There's going to be a lot of work being put into this.
Oh yeah, we know. there is work starting on it now.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is that people will come back and say, well, I can't vote for the Greens because of all their gender rubbish, or I can't vote SNP after they did all of that. And the answer to that is, look, if they're standing on the sovereignty of the people of Scotland,
mm-hmm.
the first of all, a return of a majority is Independence Day.
Mm-hmm.
Second, they're now committed to listening to the people. You don't like that policy?
Yeah.
Get a referendum and vote it out. This does two things at once. It demonstrates that the will of the majority in Scotland is to be a sovereign state.
Mm-hmm.
The majority of people also want the right to tell those elected representatives, yeah, that's a great idea, or no, you can't do that.
Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking, if I went to the SNP and I signed up, I'm going to become a member, and I say, but my backing goes to the people of Scotland, and they put me to the bottom of the list, and they ignore me. How do we get around that? How do we expose that bias within the party, if there is one?
Well, there's lots. There is that bias, and one of the problems of any top-down organisation that I think people are beginning to wake up to is that where you have power concentrated in the hands of a very few, then any hostile state, such as the English Empire, we call RUK,
mm-hmm.
Britain, can use the tactics that have been described by many people, including Cameron McNeish. Was it something I said? How the state operates, how they blackmail, how
mm-hmm.
they capture, how they pay off, how they bribe,
mm-hmm.
those they want to control.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that tiny minority who have the power, you have this open invitation to neutralize a movement
mm-hmm.
by neutralizing those at the top. So that's
right.
one thing that it's
mm-hmm.
one thing that all of the mainstream parties, all of them, need to have a look at if they're serious about a real democratic move in Scotland.
Wouldn't it be great if we had a debate in the Scottish Parliament on colonialism? Wouldn't that be just the head turner? Wouldn't that be amazing?
I don't think, Norrie, I don't think that will happen until we have made our case at the United Nations. We are going to present that case. We have, as I said, we've got a KC working on that opinion for that case.
Mm-hmm.
The evidence is jaw-dropping, absolutely jaw-dropping.
Yeah, I know.
And and the idea, this notion, well, Scotland isn't a colony because Scotland was a partner in the empire, and look how it benefited. Let me ask you something. When you have less than 10% representation in the parliament and the government is driving the empire,
mm-hmm.
and that is an empire that goes back to Elizabeth I, by the way, and Scotland had no such thing prior to that,
mm-hmm.
then how on earth is an annexed country that is sitting there with its MPs there, as Defoe said, to be laughed at, somehow responsible for the continuation of this vile imperial project
Yep.
across the world. And it's only on the basis of that ridiculous narrative, which is upheld by far too many of Scotland's political establishment, that they reject the notion that even with all there is a de facto picture of a colony, which Alf Baird has put together fantastically well.
Yes,
Then there's also what they call de jure, that is, do the legal conditions, the conditions in law exist that define this country as a colony? And in Scotland's case, after all the work that I've done and others have done, I can tell you categorically, yes, they do.
Indeed.
So once that's accepted, once that is out there, and let me tell you, its impact on international organizations and bodies when they hear it is immediate and dramatic. At home, we have to break through the colonial narrative. But I believe that once people see this being taken seriously and being debated in the international forums, then the possibility that it can come home, people can see it for what it is at home.
Well, I've got Icelandic friends, Danish people who listen to the programme, Irish, Canadian, and you know what? They're all asking me the same question. What the hell is stopping Scotland? We're waiting for you, and they don't understand about this colonialism, but maybe Ireland does. And maybe, Colette, we need a leader like Michelle O'Neill. We need somebody who can say to Westminster, we're not attending. You'll come to meet us on our terms, by the way. She's very determined that unification of Ireland will happen, probably before Scotland gets its independence, only because she's taken direct action against them. Is that who we need? Somebody like her?
Well, yeah, but I think you said, just going back slightly about reform and how they got so many votes. So we always say a week is a long time in politics. Well, the next 18 months is even longer. But if you think about the by-election in Rutherglen, the Reform candidate at that point got, I think, 400 votes. This time round, less than a year later, he got over 2,000. So things can change very, very quickly.
That's
depending on the message that you put out there.
Yes.
And obviously the message that Nigel Farage and Tice were putting out, where people were listening to that as an alternative to possibly how they're feeling, how at that time they were feeling about the Tories. So it is about the messaging. But I would also say, we're talking about everybody coming together, but I think one thing would be quite good is actually for the likes of ISP and any other political party or candidate that is going to want to stand on sovereignty and direct democracy, is actually sitting down and talking to the likes of Sinn Féin and Plaid Cymru and all that, and actually, because if we actually sit down with them, and we could actually possibly, as on the political side of things, because obviously they're talking, there's two divides here. There's obviously Salvo, Liberation and the People Movement, but again, we do need political parties to be in the Parliament. So I think in the political side of things, from my angle, because obviously we are slightly aligned with Sinn Féin with the abstentionism, and they are definitely, they're now got their first minister. They're the biggest party now in Northern Ireland, and nobody would have thought about that a few years ago.
No,
so things do move, and the message there, people are actually maybe, again in Northern Ireland, maybe now starting to think in a slightly different direction. And if you have that strong message and that strong voice there, and people are putting their head above the parapet and willing to stand up and speak out, then people will start to listen if they can actually comprehend. And it's the way you put the message out there. If they can understand that message, they will get on board with it. So I think on the political side of things, I think maybe talking to the likes of Plaid Cymru, Sinn Féin, or any other small party, such as like ISP, we actually all we could actually be sitting down talking to each other about where do we go to actually be looking actually to believing to leave this so-called union, because that's in their manifesto. I mean, that's their That's their strapline. They want to be away from the union. So I think politically there's an avenue to look at, but there's also the people movement. But things do move very, very quickly. So we need to get the right message out there. And as Sara said, there's one thing, actions speak louder than words. Actions, people like to see something going on. Sadly, with the work that obviously to set up a political party per se, nobody sees that work that goes on, and all of a sudden it's there, but they don't see what happens, the building blocks to actually launching the party. But it took many, many months, hundreds of hours, but nobody sees that. A bit like what the work that Alf Baird and Sara, Salvo, and the researchers, hundreds of hours of work getting put in, but nobody's seen that until they're ready to launch something and something's ready to be announced, and then it's there. They don't see the actual grafting that's going on. People like the action. They like to see something.
Tell me about it. Caledon Radio has gone through the mill trying to get a website up and running. And this is all done by like 3 people, I think, me and 2 others. Trying to get a broadcast system that can get these voices like yours out there to people, to receptive ears. And we get absolutely hammered by SNP diehards saying that John Swinney hasn't got why would he lower himself to talk to me? Alison Thulis, all these people. We're always up against it. And people just don't know the half. And that's a problem we've got. And it's a problem, Sara, because we don't have a proper broadcast system.
That's exactly right. That it's absolutely the case that democracy depends on a free, fair, and unbiased media. It depends on objective and fair reporting. It depends on, how do the people hold a government to account if they do not know what the government is doing? The Freeports is a perfect example of that. If those who put the Salvo Freeports campaign together, which Colette is a key member, had not begun having these meetings up and down the length and breadth of Scotland and reaching out to people involved in other countries and other, to other experts, that you've got Richard Murphy has just done a really good video on the danger that is posed by these special economic zones and free ports. It's now coming out into the media, but we had to, there was an enormous amount of work and effort and time that went into just getting past the media blockade. Every Scot should have known what these free ports were, why they had depended on Brexit because they're not legal in the EU, and at the same time that we had a particular party saying, we're independent Scotland in the EU, that same party was pushing forward something that absolutely blocks not only our re-entry into the European Union if we're an independent nation, but also membership of EFTA. So there they are talking about membership of the EU while going along with that which would explicitly obstruct us. And that's, there was a massive case to be brought against those free ports that we could very easily have won, because in the UK, there is not one UK crown. That's just a simple flat lie. There are 2 crowns. Scotland's was added as a kind of or vassal state, subordinate state to the English crown, but Scotland's crown owns the entirety of Scotland's territorial assets. So they could have challenged on that legally and had a very good chance of winning, but they didn't. They just sold, honest, I can't say it any other way. They sold us out. So a free media, a fair media, would have allowed people to know what was happening and would have allowed a pushback and a demand for resistance to this. But the media didn't cover it. And that is the same again and again. So a Scottish broadcaster that conforms with what the international organizations, and it's one of the UN that looks to see that people are getting this access to information that allows democracy to thrive, is an absolute necessity. And not just one, Norrie. We need lots of them. We need radio stations. We need online channels. We need TV channels. But at least one television news channel where things are reported fairly and objectively, or we do not have a democracy. So,
Correct.
it's fundamental.
And that's another failure of the SNP, Colette. There's loads of them, but let's not look at back. Let's look ahead. We're talking, and I like this idea of political people going into parties with this one message that the people are sovereign, that underlines everything they do as they go into Parliament. I think that would be amazing if that could get off the ground. But couple that with Labour's programme for government, which will become toxic, I fear, to the people of Scotland. And it could be a Pyrrhic victory for Keir Starmer. He's weak and he's feeble. He flip-flops. There's no reversal of Brexit. We've talked about that just there. There's no pension rises. The two-child benefit cap's still there. And the youngsters down in England will be wondering if he will bring forward to ban tuition fees for them. So we'll see no change. And if we work alongside our partners in Wales and Ireland and elsewhere, things could change, couldn't they? Very quickly.
Oh yeah, as I say, they can change very quickly. It just depends on the will of the people within the political sphere to actually do it. And but I feel now, with what has actually happened, there will be a lot of people reflecting on the situation and what we have in Scotland. So we've got 37 Labour taking seats for the Scottish side, so 37. And I heard Anna Sara this morning saying about how now they have a mandate, really, basically to talk and speak for Scotland.
Yes.
Now,
aye.
But when the SNP had the 56, or even recently when they had the 47,
Get back in your box.
the mandate didn't mean anything. But they had a mandate, but it didn't mean anything, and they didn't act on it. But now Anna Sara's on the TV this morning saying that his 37 now have a mandate to speak up for the people of Scotland and work for the people of Scotland. They basically chop and choose, they cherry pick what they think is right, and if it's not good for them, then it gets dismissed. If it's going to be good for them, they change it. Just like they were talking about changing the voting system, and now all of a sudden it's worked for them. So now they're, oh no, it's not really in our manifesto. We're not really going to do that
That's
anymore.
right. Flip-flopping.
Absolutely. So they just cherry pick what suits them. So it's not consistent. It's a mandate. What this word mandate, really, what is the definition? What does it actually mean? Because as far as I can see, a mandate, when it comes to the Westminster, it means absolutely nothing.
Correct.
It's got absolutely no authority to anybody that actually uses that word in a sentence, because they just change it to suit themselves.
Well, I was hoping that we could get on to our new Secretary of State, Ian Murray, the Viceroy General. I'm worried here, Sarah. I'm worried because the Internal Market Act can see him run roughshod over Scotland. We can see him bypass the Scottish Parliament, giving money to pet projects that they see fit, and an emergency. Any emergency they can use and close down Parliament. Whether they will or not, I don't know. But they will make it very, very difficult for the SNP Scottish Government. And I can tell you, Anna Sara will be licking his lips at trying to get power in the Scottish Parliament as well, making it equally difficult. So we've got a lot to be wary about coming up in the next few months.
We absolutely have. And as I said, I don't think that history will be kind to the SNP of the past 10 years, because that Internal Market Act cuts across the conditions of union. So you cannot say out of one side of your mouth, Scotland entered the union as a voluntary partner and not as a dependency, and out of the other side of your mouth, we are now setting aside the conditions of the partnership agreement, and we are imposing parliamentary sovereignty over the top of the claim of right on Scotland. And they went along with that. Now, that is an obvious challenge. It's, wait a minute, are you saying that we're a colony? Oh, no, you're not. You're not a colony. In that case, you've you've put this definition of Scotland forward. You've had it approved by both Houses of Parliament and signed off by the Queen, that Scotland is a voluntary partner. You are now saying that you, the British state, which is, you know, where we have a 10% representation, has the right to redraw that agreement and to impose English parliamentary sovereignty on Scotland. This is not lawful. This is not, you know, this, and actually, since it's a condition of the union, you yourselves are now ending the union. Now, that was a fight that was worth having. That Scotland Act will now have to be challenged, and it will have to go forward with, and is going to go forward as part of our case that we present to the United Nations of these, they're called wrongful acts of states. And that should have been done by the SNP. It was an absolutely lethal piece of legislation. And you hear our own MPs saying, in this, you know, from the same voice, oh, Scotland is you know, Scotland is the people of Scotland are sovereign. Scotland is a voluntary partner in, you know, in this union, and we have to accept what Westminster says is legal. And that they're not. That's not a coherent or a rational position. And where you have any party that is serious about Scotland's rights and not just getting themselves a nice little fiefdom where they carry on just like Westminster and the people are in the same boat they ever were in calling that independence, where you're actually fighting Scotland's corner. You're actually fighting for the rights of the Scottish people and the nation of Scotland. You would use that. Now we're going to have to. And, you know, and we don't have the money and the reach and the media platform. We're still going to have to do that. It's an unforgivable thing to have done, just as not challenging the Scotland Act for the same provisions where it thought that it could rewrite and say, now we're going to replace the treaty and all previous agreements with this act. Well, you're the creation of an international treaty. You do not have the authority, without wiping yourself out, to go back and rewrite the original conditions of the Treaty of Union. However history has changed things, however alteration, you do not get to say, now that this contract has created this state under these conditions, we're going to change the conditions under which we were created. And that's, you know, it's jaw-dropping that those who have been supposedly fighting for Scotland have seen fit to repeat the contradictory positions of Westminster as fact and have not challenged those unlawful acts, those wrongful state on behalf of the Scottish people. I don't think history is going to forgive them.
I don't, when it looks back, I don't think so either. I was reading a quote today and I thought I could use it at some point in the programme, but and I can't even remember who it's from, but it says, one day we will look back in amazement and disbelief when we realise the establishment, Labour, BBC, etc., tried to force us to accept that it's not evil to murder children. And I think this, the longer this goes on, the more and more people will either, two things, Colette, they'll either be set back in their ways and thinking there's nothing we can do about Gaza, let's go, or we can get really angry about it and take to the streets. History tells us a lot of people sleepwalk into this. If it's not hurting me, it's not my problem. Or charity begins at home, that kind of message. We will. I don't know. I think Labour's going to come up against a big struggle, and we've got to be ready for it in Scotland. My worry, and I'll keep coming back to this, because I don't think I've got, even in my own mind, I don't think I'm happy with what we've discussed today about where we're going forward with a political party. I honestly think that there's people in that SNP who shouldn't be there. They're infiltrators. They've come from somewhere to make a career, and they've settled in and they've done very nicely. They've not progressed from 2014 on. So we need a clear out. The SNP have got to clear out and vet everyone that comes in. And perhaps when Sarah's idea, when people get vetted, they're asked, do you believe that the people of Scotland are sovereign? If they can't answer that positively, they don't get into the party. There's got to be some radical wake up, Colette, and I don't know if that's going to happen in 2 years' time.
Again, that's really up to the SNP. Whether it's going to exist in 2 years, I don't know. That really is up to them. But I think
but hold on, Colette. It's up to them. You keep saying. People like me and others who are even moved to the ISP, and they've moved from the SNP to Alaba and nowhere at all, were the building blocks of that SNP. We've got a vested interest. We created that. We will not see that be ruined and ruled by these ultra modernizers who are like the Nicola Sturgeons. We've all put something into that SNP, and we cannot leave it to them. We've got to either reclaim it back or do something radical, maybe even a new party. Even people today are messaging me, Norrie, we need a Sinn Féin in Scotland. We need a radical campaign. We need a populist leader. We're going down a road that might not be the one we really, really want because of inaction and inability of political parties.
You know, can I just come in here, Norrie? One of the things that being deplatformed, which is a lovely word for you're blocked everywhere unless someone does a wee article on you suggesting that you're all nutters, is that there is a party in Scotland that is already standing not only on abstentionism, we will not take an oath to a foreign monarch. And that is a foreign monarch, and we will not take our seats in a foreign parliament. Has been, that has been treated as, that's the ISP, and it has been treated as and also ran an inconsequential, the same party that explained to people how the D'Hondt voting system works and first suggested the supermajority, is already standing on an abstentionist platform. And up until now, that was one of the unrealistic, naive things that it was doing. Well, look what Sinn Féin's just done.
Yes, but look, the problem we've got in Scotland, and it gets back to our broadcast, they've got a broadcast system that can showcase and highlight what they're doing. And it gets to people through their televisions in their front rooms. Colette's got the most amazingly impossible almost job of trying to get her message out. It's not ISP's fault.
No.
But we've created something big. What I'm saying, Sarah, we've created something really big. All of us have got a stake in this, and we've all gone off and left the SNP, but we've still got a bit of us in there. We didn't start this SNP to be shafting us 10 years down the line with their shenanigans and non-committal.
It's what's happened, and what I would say to people who are mourning, and and I was one of those in the early days.
Yeah.
Well, not the days of the SNP, but working my socks off when we had hardly any members, and it was a hell of a job to get a quorum meeting and leafleting and travelling the length and breadth. And now what we have is a colonial
SNP.
ally, and a colonial establishment. It's part of the establishment, and it's an extension of Westminster. Now, that was never, if your worst nightmare is if your primary vehicle for the self-determination of the people of Scotland, and I'm going to keep saying that, it's not independence, it's for any kind of state, it's the self-determination of the people of Scotland to map their own future as they see fit. And you find that what has actually happened is that the so-called vehicle for independence of some kind or another is in a blind alley, and it doesn't want to come out. It is quite happy where it is, thank you, but then you let it go. But you look at history. At the moment when that liberation consciousness, we are a colony, this is never going to work for us, this is a crime against us, we need to stand up and do something about. When that happens, it's always the case that a party that might have taken blood, sweat and tears to create and had all massive support is simply, it either gets with the programme or it is left behind. And Sinn Féin swept the IPP out within a couple of years of getting traction, of getting their message across to people. And this week you saw them return, I think it was 6 extra Sinn Féin MPs who will not take the seats in Westminster.
Yeah.
Now, it's a thing in the heart that says, but we did all this to build the SNP. Well, then let's say it served its purpose.
Yeah.
Now we're into the age of liberation. Everything changes. We have to learn as we go. We've never done this before. But by God,
if any country can do this, it's Scotland, because once the Scots get up on their hind legs and get angry and get determined, we don't stop. That's why the Labour movement, the socialist movement in Scotland, in right across Britain, was largely born in Scotland, because that's who we are. We just need to tap into that, and to tap into it, people need to see, here's the direction, here's a clear position and a clear goal. And this, now we have to make the road as we go. It's like Wile E. Coyote, you frantically building the road across the gulf in front of him with bricks as he goes. Well, that's how it happens, and that's what we're going to have to do. So it's not, tell us exactly what will happen. Well, we can tell you the stepping stones that need to be there. But when you are in that position, you say, okay, let it go now. It got us here, but it's going around in circles. It's not going to take us any further. Now we start putting that road down in front of us, inventing it as we go, because Scots are the most inventive, creative, problem solvers in the world.
I'm telling you, all my friends across the globe tell me this. They're looking forward to the second Scottish Enlightenment, Colette. And Colette, I wasn't getting on at you. What I'm trying to say is, I believe more people have to get away from behind their keyboards and their Twitter accounts and get on the streets, just like you do, Colette. And for anyone who doesn't know Colette, Colette's got she's visually impaired. She has a guide dog, and she gets everywhere. She goes out into the streets. If she can do that, you can do that. That's what we need from our public. We need to get people talking to each other. We need to have group meetings, town halls filled up again, just like 2014, when everywhere there was a ceilidh or a dance and people were talking about politics. We have to get back to that, because us, the people, will decide, not a political party. And political parties won't lead us. We will lead them. We're coming up to the last 5 minutes. Colette, what's your final comments on what we've been talking about today? Where are we heading? Where do you hope in the next 6 months will be?
Right, okay. I just want to very quickly come back, because we kind of answered my question that was kind of came to me.
Aye, go on.
ISP are here. As Sarah said, we've been speaking about abstention, and until we were talking about abstention leading up to the by-election last year, nobody spoke about it. But it's starting. The message is getting out there, and people are looking into it, finding out what it means, etc. Messages take a long time. So we've been given those messages and all the resources that we could possibly do. But yes, we're blocked because we're not on the mainstream media. But we have been giving out, and we've been doing the stuff with the free ports, doing the public meetings. And again, that message in itself, which is non-partisan, that's taken a lot of time to get the message out to the public, because we're not on the mainstream. But we're doing what we can. When you're talking about the SNP, why is it necessary? Maybe, like Sarah said, and this is where the point that I was going to make before Sarah came in, was you're talking about revamping the SNP. And I said, yes, it is up to the leadership. It is up to them what they do with their party. But what if it's like a car and it goes for its MOT and they say, look, no, it's a waste of time spending the money on it. It's done. Right. But people are talking about setting up political parties. That's all very well and good. ISP have been going for 4 years. Because we're not getting the public mainstream media, a lot of people still don't know about us. So any other person that's going to try and set up another political party, it's going to take them even longer to try and get the message out than what even ISP have been doing over the past 4 years.
Colette,
because we don't have the media.
Yeah, reform.
Reform.
They've come from nowhere. They're not even a political party.
No, they haven't.
No, they haven't. They've had big names. They're influenced by multimillionaires. You had Richard Tice, who was on. He had a weekly show on Talk TV. He had mainstream media. He had people talking about them. He had Nigel Farage talking about them. Nigel Farage, as you know, has been going for many years. But he had that mainstream media, Norrie. That's complete, and he had the resources.
His wife's a journalist as well.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely. So it's completely different to somebody saying, oh, I think you should just set up another political. It's not that easy. It's taken us 4 years. But even that one message, abstentionism, nobody was talking about it until we started saying, well, we're standing on abstention. Oh, what's that? And then people started going, oh, right, that. But it takes time. The Freeports is taking time. As you know, we've been going for over a year now. And still, a lot of people in Scotland are completely unaware of it, even though we've been travelling the country doing these public meetings. I think really what we have to do is continue what we're doing, try and get as much out there as we possibly can. We need to galvanise people. People do need to start coming out and actually being active now. They can't just stay at home and just moan. They need to come and be with us. We need to have this army behind us. We'll do the legwork, but we need people to go and start spreading the word as well. We can't do it all, Norrie. You can't do it all. Sara can't do it. We can't do it all. We need people now to actually get out that, oh, well, you know, this is the way it is kind of mindset. Look forward to 2026. Get yourself energized, get yourself motivated, and actually start backing the people that have actually put their head above the parapet. And we don't get paid for any of this.
No.
We are doing this because we want to get the end goal. We want to achieve something, but we can't do it by ourselves. We need people to come on board.
Well, I couldn't disagree with any of that, Colette. Well said. And one thing that you did that's really important there, we don't get paid for any of this, Sara. And perhaps our passion takes over our desire for cash. And maybe money and power has got in the way of people on the independence campaign. Maybe we should limit I don't know, maybe limit wages or something for a politician so that they can suffer a bit of hardship now and again to bring them down to earth. I don't know. But I tell you this, people on the ground are doing far more work than the SNP, and that has got to change.
Well, you know, I think power and importance is a very heady drug. I think it's actually a bigger one than money. This idea of being someone special, being unaccountable, having all that power, and it's not good for people. And it's one of the reasons direct democracy is so important, because if you don't have that much power, and you know you're always going to have over your shoulder because you're going to be being watched by the people, you don't get that sense of I belong to that special club, and there's only a few of us in this club, and I'm really important and powerful. And you see it when an elected MP or MSP walks into a room. You see people, you know, immediately the deference, and that's incredibly bad for the human soul, and because it's a real drug. So direct democracy is what will take care of that, and we need to be really, you know, hammering that home. But I really believe this is a moment of opportunity and not a moment of death loss. It's the moment when people can finally wake up to the fact that the Westminster route was never going to deliver for Scotland, and that the issues are not about negotiating a soft divorce, which is not going to be granted anyway by the coloniser, but actually saying, what are Scotland's rights? What makes us different? What makes us Scots, not anybody else? What are we in danger of losing? And I'll just finish with this. One of the things that I had a meeting recently with the European group as part of the European Initiative for Democracy. And they had no idea about Scotland's real position. We had, a couple of hours with them. And as we went, this lovely lady, Elizabeth, would come back to, but that's not how the rest of the international community understands Scotland's position. And I would just, we know that. That's why we're doing what we're doing. And would go through. And finally, I ended up by saying, we really aren't another flavour of England. Let me tell you about Scotland's laudable laws. First legal aid in the world, free education, private education banned, profiteering banned, the first environmental laws that we know of where people have cut down a tree a certain size in age and they had to plant so many in replacement. The right to fair rents, the right to loans at reasonable interest, and the right to get rid of a government that has destroyed civil rights, human rights in the country. And so it was very brief, but I ran through all these things. We really are, this is the constitution Scotland had before it was annexed.
Well, It's
It's
amazing.
easily modified. And she said, she stopped and they looked at each other and she said, and she looked at me with kind of shiny eyes and she said, you know, it seems to me that Scotland is a nation well worth saving. And I said, it seems that way to us too. I'm telling you, we've got friends out there who will see what we are, but hey, we have to do that first.
We have to. Listen, before I came on air, I was thinking, well, this is going to be one of these shows. Do you know what I mean? But at the end of it, I'm a bit more hopeful because, and people listening to the show are getting in touch saying this connection with Plaid Cymru Sinn Féin through ISP and other parties is a winner. Got to happen, Colette. And a moment of opportunity, definitely, Sarah. Listen, we've come to the end of our time. Just to let people know, this has been recorded. It'll be up on our webpage, www.caledonmedia.scot. And I'd just like to thank both of you for coming on. Short notice, just yesterday, I just decided to get you both on. So thanks to both of you to coming on to Caledon Radio.
Pleasure, Norrie. Cheers.
All the best, girls. Right, bye now, girls. Right, listen, that was the show that was. As I just said, it's going to be up on the webpage. If you want to contribute to Caledon Radio, we have a coffee fund, buy us a coffee. We don't really have a crowdfunder now because that was closed down. We had enough money at the time, but things are getting a bit tight here as well. So if you can buy us a coffee, KO/coffee, our account. If you can do that for us, that would help keep us going and keep our head above water. It's not easy doing this stuff. Listen, thanks for listening, folks, and bye for now.